فاطمة والحسن والحسين وتسعة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين عليهم السلام. اللهم عجل بفرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا محافظا وقائلا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكن وارضك عطاء وتمتع فيها طويلا. Like always, it's a blessing and it's a pleasure to have our dearest Dr. Sachedina with us and benefiting from his knowledge as we have the hadith, as he says, zakat al-ilm nashra. So his zakat is to share it with us, and may Allah bless us so we will learn from him and notice that whatever that he says, inshallah ta'ala, it will be useful for the coming of the promised Imam Mahdi to establish justice and peace on earth, inshallah ta'ala. So without any more talking, Dr. Sachedina, inshallah ta'ala, is going to benefit. Sallallahu Muhammad wa
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salam ala ashraf al-anbiya wal-mursalin. Rahmatan lil-Alameen. Abil Qasim Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We have missed a number of lectures, but inshallah we'll try to catch up with what we are doing. And we are discussing fundamentally one of the central messages of the Quran. And that is the purpose of sending the prophets, according to the Quran, is to communicate divine guidance in such a way that it becomes part of the human development to the perfection. So that human beings can learn from it and can find solutions to the constant developments of history itself. Because we are living at a time when the history is moving very quickly. Events happen and they happen so quickly that we almost forget them. What you read today, tomorrow if somebody asks you, did you read this, did you know this? Because there's a glut of information coming through the sources, through the media, through everything that is surrounding us. Technology is dealing with what we call the information and how the information can be spread. The Quran is concerned about this. For two reasons, the Quran is very much aware what happens to the information that is given to the people for their guidance. First of all, the Quran is worried about its distortion. That the message could be easily distorted. Put it in a way that is pleasing to those who hear it, while the actual message is lost in the process. The second fear of the Quran is the human gift of forgetting it. Human beings have been given a gift of forgetfulness. I say gift, I don't say a curse. Because there are many parts of our life that we would rather forget them and not remember them, so that they do not cause us to be depressed by them. There are things that happen in our life every day. If we were to follow them, they would cause in us depression. So there are two parts. One is distortion, the other one is forgetfulness. And I said, forgetfulness is a major cause for reminders to come. The function of the revelation is to remind us our original goals. Because what happens in the process is, we forget why we are created. We forget why we are brought in this life. So we have a tendency, and this is human, this is the human dimension. We forget, and the prophets are sent time and again to remind us. One of the major functions of the prophets is dhikr. Dhikr in the meaning of reminding. Because dhikr also has the meaning of remembrance. Qur'an, the dhikr means the Qur'an that is, providing us with remembrance. Dhakkirhum is one of the very important functions of the prophets. And the ayah that we have been reciting in the last two lectures and this one is, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا مُوسَى بِآيَاتِنَا أَنْ أَخْرِجْ قَوْمَكَ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ من الظلمات إلى النور وذكرهم بأيام الله إن في ذلك لآيات لكل صبار شكور. I made it clear in the first lecture that this is the heart of remembrance. Why should history be studied by all of us? Why should we be interested in history? It's a major question. Why is it that Muslims don't read history? It's a subsidiary question. If you go around the world, in the Muslim world, and I was yesterday at George Mason University, there were Muslim youths, leader youths, who came from England, and our Muslim young leaders from George Mason University. And there were about 20 of them sitting around the table, and I asked them, how many of you have read the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? There were only three hands up. People are not reading. If you don't read the Seerah, you don't understand the Quran. Because the Quran needs to be understood in the way it came down to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, besides that, the function of history is to provide you with templates so that you learn from the lessons of the past to avoid those mistakes again as you move forward. This happens, by the way, in our personal histories too. We all have personal histories. There were times we made mistakes, we failed. There were times we succeeded. We need to keep a note of it. And remember them as templates, not be controlled by them, but use them in such a way that they become a source of reminders to us. At a particular time, this is what happened, this is how I dealt with this problem. I sorted it out in this way. It's good to do that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has also required all narratives to be testified. In order for us to accept any story, قَدْ تَبَيَّنَ, you must make sure that you are hearing the right things. إِذَا جَاءَكُمْ فَاسِقٌ بِنَبَعٍ. This is very interesting, that if a corrupt individual, a wicked person comes with a story to you, you better make sure that what he says is correct. Otherwise, there will be nadama for you. You will regret it. Now, you know that in everyday life, people tell us stories. Individual to individual, we tell stories, and, unfortunately, we don't have recorders all the time so that we can record everything from each other. So that we can say, this is what you said 10 days ago. Are you changing your story? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there is also a possibility, according to the Quran, إِذَا جَاءَ عَادِلٌ بِنَبَعٍ. This was fasiq who comes to you to spread lies. But there are also good people who come and tell you something. Should you question them? No, you should still assure that the person is adil. You know what I'm talking about is, making sure that the source of your information is the quality of the source. A person, in the study of hadith, we have al-jarh wa ta'dil. Our ulama are known, especially our jurists, when they use any tradition for making a legal decision, they want to make sure that the tradition is reliable. They do jarh wa ta'dil. They wound it and then they repair it. How do they wound it? Somebody says, about music, let's say. Somebody says, listening to the music is like listening to shaitan. We have hadith, by the way, of this sort. Now you want to find out whether you can really make a ruling from it, whether music is halal or haram. So as a scholar, you are supposed to first make sure that the information in the sunnah is properly validated. What we would call in the legal language, accredited. The credibility cannot be questioned by anyone. Imagine the stories that you hear. The Prophet said this, the Prophet in the Battle of Badr made this speech. Tabari mentioned the speech of the Prophet on the night of Badr, for example. We have it. If you open Tabari, on the night of Badr, there is a speech of the Prophet ﷺ. But before also there are other speeches, the other speakers who spoke. And Tabari is telling us, then the Prophet spoke and he said this. But also the history is telling us that at that point when he gave the speech, he was red. Yes, it is there, by the way. He was red. That means when the Prophet used to get angry, he would become red. And he was angry from what he heard from other people saying at that time, by the way. And the sources say, so and so said, not reporting the tradition, not reporting the speech. So and so gave a speech, so and so gave a speech, so and so gave a speech. So you have the names of the people who spoke. Then comes the Prophet who is red. That means what they said angered the Prophet. He didn't say anything. He kept quiet. But then he stood up and gave a speech. The speech is recorded. I'm going to ask you, why are the speeches of those other people are not recorded? Why those who spoke before the Prophet is not being told to us, the reader? There must be a reason. Either the speech was forgotten, or there was, personality involved whose words might have created a very, negative portrait of that person. It's quite possible. But we have the Prophet's speech there in all intact. What he said is known to us. What others said, we don't know it. There must be some reason why the historian did not report those things. Now, all this is known as what this قَدْ تَبَيَّنُوا. This is the function of a scholar, this is the function of a listener, this is the function of anybody who is being told a story. You should not take it as face value. That's what the Quran is teaching us. If you hear something is being told, especially using an authority that is in the past, to whom you have no access, except through the written sources, you are then required to question the sources and to examine the sources, investigate them so that you know for sure that what you are hearing is correct. We agree on this so much? The Quran then has a function, has a purpose in teaching us why we should know about Nabi Musa, why we should know about Nabi Isa, why should we know about the events of the communities in the past. The Quran is adamant, says, go, travel in the world and find out what happened to other civilizations. And what happens when the people follow the civilization of Tawheed. The Quran is a big philosophy, by the way. I don't think Muhammad Baqir Sadr talks about this. Some of the points I've taken from his lectures. He talks about al-qiyada, leadership. But then he tells us the methodology of the tafsir. But one of the things he raises is this. historical question, historical information. How do we digest it? How do we process it? Because we have information, a lot of information is coming to us. We don't even know how to make sure that what we are hearing is correct, is reliable. Why should we make sure that it is reliable? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ذَكِّرْهُمْ بِأَيَّامِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ الْآيَاتٌ لِصَبَّارٍ كُلِّ صَبَّارٍ شَكُورٍ. Tell them the stories correctly. Tell them the ayat of God. Tell them the events properly so that they learn about it. Why should they learn about it? Because there are lessons for them in them. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ الْآيَاتٌ. This ayat, by the way, is lessons. There are signs for them. They must learn from these when they hear them. What should they learn? They should learn how to be patient. How to be patient. How to digest this situation in which we find ourselves. Because there's a lot of suffering in human life. For different reasons we get into trouble. And there's a lot of pain. How do we digest this? And you see, Sabbar and Shakur are both Sighatul Mubarakah. Sabbar. It's not only Sabr. It's not Sabir. The one who is very, very patient. Is able to be very kind. Is able to, be very generous and magnanimous when people are giving him information, and is able to respect the dignity of the other person who is reporting it. It's very important to do it. Coming back to the example of Tabari, why he is not giving the speeches of the people who are speaking before the Prophet on the night of Badr is that he wants to cover these individuals up. Doesn't want to expose them. This is very important to keep in mind. And this is Tabari, a great historian. You have read the article that I have sent you by Abdulaziz Duri, and he's writing about how the Arabs began to write history. How the akhbar evolved, akhbar al-tiwal, long narratives about the Prophet, about the Sahaba, about the, battles and, maghazi, all these things are interesting. Why are they interesting? Because they are very important templates for the community to learn from them. But if you tell a lie about those things, they will stop teaching the community. Remember this all the time. When you tell lies from this place, where you have an opportunity to tell the truth, because remember, the search for any information is to reach the truth. Al-Haq is the goal. To reach the truth means to be enlightened by it. When you know the truth, then you will not go away from it. Also, when you know the truth, you are capable of passing moral judgment. When you know the truth, then you say, that person was wrong, this person was right. This is what I call moral judgment. You don't want to say anything more. But you want to say that person was not committed to the message. This person was committed to the message. For example, on many occasions, Abu Dhar gives the speech. Abu Dhar says something. Salman says something. Miqdad says something. Ammar says something. And they are reported. Then also there is, Amr ibn al-As saying something. Ubadah bin Samit saying something. Abu Bakr saying something. Umar saying something. In other words, there are so many people who are talking. And the history is full of the accounts that they give us. We want to find out what history is ultimately important for you and me as a 21st century Muslim. My interest in the past has a very, prominent goal. I want to understand the past so that I can mold my future. I can say, this is the mistake I will avoid. This is the right path I will follow. كان في قصصهم إبرة لأولي الألباب. في قصص إبرة لأولي. Ibra is your movement from unknown to the known. You don't know how to deal with a particular situation. That's unknown to you. You don't know how to deal with it. But then you learn about it, then you become, in other words, the ghaib becomes hadir for you. The unknown becomes known to you. This is the Ibra. When Ibn Khaldun is writing Kitab al-Ibar, it's the plural of Ibra, that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to say that I have read many histories, but this is what I have come to understand, what we call in Farsi Chakide Matlab, Usare Matlab. What I understood properly is this, I'm presenting to you. It's important to read Ibn Khaldun, by the way, because Ibn Khaldun is writing in the 13th century. Tabari writes in 8th century, 9th century. There are so many centuries in between them. So many histories have been written. Mas'udi has written, so many have written. In other words, Arabs have written a lot of information about the early days of Islam. Keep in mind, I've told you that our interest is in the first 70 years of Islam. And the reason is that these are formative years of the community, first 70 years. When the Prophet does his hijrah, until 70 of hijrah, we are interested to find out what is authentic information. Who is writing about it? Why is he or she? There were no she. There were he always. There were always men writing about it. So how much, even if I want to be inclusive, I can't be, because they were all men writing about, they were the ones who were doing research, and they were the ones who were spreading the knowledge about the narratives. The philosophy of the Quran, the historiography of the Quran is based on human appreciation of critical methodology that God has provided us. I want to draw a large conclusion, قَدْ تَبَيَّنُوا, is connected with investigate anything that you are told. Don't accept it as face value. Don't readily accept when people say something about someone. You will save yourself from so many prejudgments. In the historical matters, especially in the matters of religion, we really want to understand two important ideas in religion: creation and revelation. Why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us? What is the philosophy of being created by God? The second thing we want to understand is the function and the role of revelation. I'm using an English term. The Arabic term is wahy. In English, when we say revelation, there was something that was hidden, which was revealed. In Arabic, there is a very different meaning, there is a very different sense. Wahy means you did not even expect it, but you are being informed about it. Abruptly. This is very important to keep in mind. Ilham is premeditated. You are thinking about something. You are a mathematician, you know mathematics very well. There's a problem you could not solve. At night you sleep and you get up and you receive inspiration, ilham, how to solve it. You wake up and you solve the problem you are faced with. Wahy is different. It comes abruptly without premeditation. If there was premeditation, then there was a problem with it. Then we would look for what we call the pre-information that a person has. All of a sudden, in a culture in which nobody is reading, the Quran comes up with this idea, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. You see the abruptness? Very abrupt. In a culture where everybody is not writing, not reading, all of a sudden the Quran comes, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, اقرأ باسمك الذي خلق. Revelation and creation are connected. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us is that I'll give you abruptly information about the future that you need to know. But you will not be given it free of charge, you'll have to work for it. No information will be given to you in the plate. You'll have to look for it. Because Allah knows that, إِنَّ لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. For human beings, they must struggle all the time. They must try all the time. If you stop struggling, there's no more life. That's the difference between living and dead person. We, the followers of the Jafari school, are being taught by our scholars that there's a qualitative difference between life. A life that cannot think for itself, a life that does not engage in thinking, is not worth living. Such a person and the dead person are alike. Those who don't want to take up the challenge of thinking. So it's very, Ayatollah Khouyi in his discussion about the mayyit and all, he says, there's a should we keep a person alive? Even if the person is not, there's no hope of saving that person. This is medical ethics, by the way. Should we keep a person alive? Ayatollah Khouyi says, look at the quality of life. Don't just inject things in them and say, oh, you can live, we can keep that person alive. Insurance is paying, after all, why not? That's how the decisions are made in the hospital. But the quality of life is absent. That person is in coma, cannot even take any decision on his own, on her own. We are the only ones in the schools, among the madahib, who are raising the question of kayfiyat al-hayat, the quality of life. All others are saying, no, if you have, if there are means of keeping you alive, then we should use all the means to keep you alive. Well, Ayatollah Khouyi is correct. There's no quality to life if I can't make my own decisions. I can't even decide what medication should I accept or what I should not accept. They're injecting everything in me. And I'm in coma. In other words, I'm not even a competent, decision maker. Why should I make those decisions? I'm talking about the larger picture that emerges in the Quran is you cannot accept any decision without investigating it. History even more so, because history is so important for my and your identification as a Muslim. Why are you Muslim? Because the Prophet of Muhammad was the one who gave this message and I accepted this Islam, and from that day I am a Muslim. Investigate why are you a Muslim. Investigate why are you a human being. Creation and revelation. Keep these two symbols in your mind, that there is khilqa, and there is wahy, awha. Two things are working together. God creates us and provides us with provisions so that we can progress on the path. But that requires, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا مُوسَى بِآيَاتِنَا أَنْ أَخْرِجْ قَوْمَكَ. This أَخْرِجْ قَوْمَكَ is history of Exodus. What the Old Testament speaks about Exodus. Getting the Jews out of Egypt. That's what it is. أَخْرِجْ قَوْمَكَ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. But the Quran is doing مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ in a very figurative way. In any kind of darkness that is controlled by ignorance. Ignorance is dark. Historical information, therefore, plays a very important role in the Islamic civilization, which is based on Tawhidi philosophy. A word about Tawhidi philosophy. There's only one creator. There's one God who speaks to us, all the human beings. And He creates in us a desire to be one community. وَكَانَ النَّاسُ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا. Human beings were supposed to be a one community, because humanity joined them, combined them as human beings. ثُمَّ اخْتَلَفُوا. Human beings, they got separated, they disputed one another, they got divided. But the purpose of the divine purpose is to keep a global community together. So you are a global community, you are the ummah, under one system, under theocratic system, under God's guidance. But you need to work very hard in order to reach that goal. This goal, it can be reached only when you defeat the zulumat, when you defeat the darkness of ignorance. Nabi Musa is being told that Banu Israel not only should be experiencing exodus, which is physical movement from one place to another place, from a troubled area to a safe area, but also taken out of the darkness of ignorance about who is the creator and who is appointed Musa to become the prophet. In other words, creation and revelation are the goals of the history. Therefore, this is the foundation of the Tawhidi civilization. Tawhidi civilization is based upon recognition of creation by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and recognition of the source of information of moving from darkness to the light. From darkness to the light. Abdulaziz Duri, and this is what he told me himself. He's marhum, by the way, he died 3 years ago. When he went to London in the School of Oriental and African Studies to do his PhD, he was told very clearly by the scholars that the classical sources on historical information in the Islamic civilization cannot be relied upon to write a good history about Islam. That's the beginning of what we call a shock therapy. If I come and tell you that the history that you are reading is unreliable, it will shock you. It will move you. Oh my God, I've been reading it for ages now. So no, that's not reliable. Imagine you are a young person going to London in the 40s and 50s. And you go from your culture to the culture that is regarded as superior. The British have already done it. They've created in us inferiority complex, so to speak. That's what they did in their colonies. Whether it was India, Tanzania, or anywhere, wherever they went, that's what they did. So here we are, trying to understand our reality, and there comes a shock from a professor in SOA saying that, the sources you are reading are not reliable. Why am I supposed to do the research then? Where will I get the research done from if my sources are not reliable? And there was this Leon Seteni, the Italian scholar, who looked upon suspicion, said, he has annales, means narratives of year by year, like our historians do. And this was, the year so-and-so, this is what happened in this year. This is the year so-and-so, this is what happened in this year. That's how you read history. Tabari, if you open it, goes year by year. You read information year by year. What do you do with it? If you are told this is not reliable, then what are you doing as a historian? It is true, though, by the way, that most of the histories that are written today, in any field of history, whether it is South American history, European history, French history, German history, in every history there are big, big question marks. Who wrote this history? Why did they write it in this way? Was it the victims who wrote the history? And did the victims write and their histories were known to the scholars or not? And those who wrote for the people. So when you read French Revolution, there are two versions of it. What the royalists wrote was quite different. And what the people wrote from their viewpoint was quite different. Who do you trust? Who do you accept in writing a good history about France? Let's face the situation in our case. Most of our historians are writing during the Abbasid period, during the early Abbasid period. Most of them. I don't mean to say the sources that they are using were written at that time. There were sources in the society available. They were reading them, Al-Madaini, Abu Mikhnaf. There are so many names, Al-Zuhri. You know, these are famous names. These are historians, by the way. They are the ones who are writing about the narratives. Abu Mikhnaf, for example, we know the history of Karbala from Abu Mikhnaf. Al-Madaini. Zuhri is writing about Banu Umayyah in Damascus. He's a historian of, you can't understand Damascus period of the Umayyad period or Umayyad history without reading Zuhri. Zuhri's account of it. So you have different sources available to you. And you are in the verge of accepting or rejecting some of the documentation. History is based upon documentation. You can't talk about anything without citing your source. That's a given. No research in history is valid if there are no sources cited. But the question arises about the sources themselves. If they are written under the commission from the government, then there would be government sources. Or if it is written from Freedom Foundation, you know, we have these foundations in Washington, there are so many think tanks. You read their names and you know what they are going to say to you. You know very well where are they coming from. You know, they are looking at Islamic fundamentalism, they are looking at this or that, you know, so you know what kind of issues they are going to take up. Well, in the same way, our historians were also ideological. The origin from ideology. What is amazing is Mas'udi. How many of you know about Mas'udi at all? Anything about Mas'udi? He was a Shia historian. He wrote Muruj al-Zahab. He also has another book, At-Tanbih wal-Ishraf. You understand the title, Tanbih wal-Ishraf? Critically evaluating sources. Ishraf, you know, Ishraf Kardan. Pay attention to it. Supervise it. Ishraf. In other words, he was a top historian. The first book that was ever translated into French historians' history was Mas'udi's. Karawo, there is a French scholar who translated it completely, all the 4 volumes. Best translation. Because it's not easy to understand the classical sources. If you look at Mas'udi, you would think that he would have a Shia bias. Tarafdari. That's what we mean. There's no scholar who doesn't have a bias. I'll be very honest with you. Even if you look at my work, I have my own bias. I have my pre-understanding, which is interfering with my research. Sometimes I'm able to control it, sometimes I'm not able to control it. It's true. Mas'udi is writing the history. You would think he would have a Shia bias. I invite you. Maybe we have a copy of Mas'udi here. We might have in the sources here. There's a volume in which he speaks about Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Khalifa. I think it's the first volume. There are about 7 pages about this Khalifa, by the way. And you should read it. And see the way a neutral historian is writing about someone. Although his own predilection, his own preference would have been very different. He might have chosen to be very polemical. Write about him something very nasty, something very bad about him. After all, you know, he has his own bias. What I call ideological bias. Instead of following that, he's so scholarly. He's so scholarly. I weigh and I measure the scholarship through his ability to write about someone he totally disagrees with his policies. And still is able to write as a neutral observer what he did in history, how he wrote about him, what did he do, what kind of clothes he was wearing, what did he do in Medina, how did he manage in Palestine when he went to Palestine, when he saw Muawiyah for the first time, what did he do? It's very difficult. when you believe in certain things. You come from an ideological background. I'm a Shia historian. And therefore I need to be careful about what I write about these people who actually ruined Shia tradition. Or you might have different ideas about them. Or on the contrary, you go and take the example of Tabari. As a Sunni historian, he's going to write about Uthman. And he knows the weaknesses of this Khalifa. And he has to write it. This is what I call the test of قَدْ تَبَيَّنُوا, investigation. Uthman's time was so critical in understanding the entire history of the Khilafah in the early days that if you did not deal with this Khalifa properly, you would not understand the subsequent problems the Ummah was faced with. I am daring enough to tell you that Uthman's period actually was a prelude to Karbala. Had there not been that kind of nepotism and favorism and bringing the Umayyads to power everywhere, we would have seen a different story. Karbala would have happened, but in a different way. Probably, I don't know. I cannot speculate. But I can tell you so much, that one of the reasons why Tabari is confused, you take a look at that, you have Tabari, you brought it last time, look at the Uthman's period and his final evaluation of Uthman. Qala Abu Ja'far, as they would say. This is Abu Ja'far's opinion about Uthman. And he's struggling between what you call idealism and realism. Idealistically, you don't want to say something about a person, you have already raised him above other human beings. You are saying they are Rashidun. They are rightly guided. They are the best examples. And here you are, control. What can I do with this information about him? Should I integrate it with what I'm saying? He is my Rashid. He is my divinely guided person. How do I deal with him? You can see, if you are a good psychologist, you can see how Tabari is struggling to adhere to the truth about the individual characterization, and yet is able to bring out what he thinks is a problem. Believe me, this is one of the best sections of Tabari. You begin to respect Tabari for that. That despite his Rashidun ideology, that all the Rashidun were udul, all the Rashidun were good, all the Rashidun were divinely guided, he comes very hard on the third Khalifa. He says, no, he did many mistakes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is what the mistakes he did. This is why we have a problem today. He doesn't say it, but we can draw those conclusions. Why Arabiya, why this, Qawmiya, why is this kind of, Arabicization of the entire Islamic tradition occurred under the Umayyads. Umayyads were responsible for it. But there was already precedent for it in the early times. That means the Rashidun period. And therefore there was a struggle going on among the early companions. Are we Arabs first or Muslims first? Are we Qurayshi first or are we Muslims first? By the way, it's obvious in the poetry of that period, in the literature of that period. And this is preserved by the Abbasid historian. Now, in SOAS, Abdulaziz Duri is learning for the first time, he's being told that the Abbasid historians had ideological preference for certain things and therefore they wrote in certain ways. Duri was not able to do that when he was still in Iraq. As a student. He comes in London for the first time, he's being confronted by his own professors because there's a general dissatisfaction the way Muslims are writing history. It still is akhbar, narratives. But the akhbar have not gone through sifting and, cleaning and, it has not gone through that. I'll give you a very good example that happened in University of Virginia. Mr. Jefferson's treatment of the slaves was always a dark chapter. And when you went to visit Monticello, which is the house of Mr. Jefferson in Charlottesville, they never took you in the basement. I'm talking about 70s. Because basement is where the slaves lived. And he had relationship with the slave girls, you know, how the slaves were treated and how they lived, you know, it was not a good condition. There used to be a cover-up of that section of, you know, of Monticello. It was never shown to the public. Then there was a big conference held in the University of Virginia History Department, because we are the largest history department in the state, by the way. And I don't know how many professors we have. And they started rereading the history of Mr. Jefferson. And they smashed the idolatry that Mr. Jefferson was a good man. He was a good man. I read about him and he was quite honest about it, but the later generation start cleaning up, whitewashing the history. Because there's something about American culture we have not faced until now. The slavery period of American history, squarely. We have not. I'll be very honest with you. I don't know how many of you saw this film about this 12 years of slavery. Have you seen this? You must see that. You must see that. And now there is already a call for a legislation that this should not happen again in American history. But we are not still teaching slavery the way it should be taught. There's a subtle discrimination going on in the culture. This is what I call, it's like they ask us, why are the Shia so much adamant about remembering Ashura? Why should they do it? Because it creates animosity, it creates bad feelings. You know what the political psychologists are saying? If you don't face what you did to the victims, then you will never be able to solve the problems of the community. It's a fact. You need to face squarely what you do to others. I'm a family counselor. You know, a fight between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law. If they don't face the reality, I've not been able to solve the questions, by the way. I go to their homes, I talk to them on the phone, I talk to them, you know, and nothing works. Only when I hear from the mouth of daughter-in-law saying that I mistreated my mother-in-law, or the mother-in-law saying that I mistreated my daughter-in-law, that's the only time they come to talk to one another. Reconciliation is a possibility. Today we are talking about Darul Taqreeb. People are coming together. You are telling our brothers and sisters from different madhahib saying that we are all one. After all, we are all one Muslim community. We are part of the Tawheed. And yet you find that there is a missing aspect of it. You know what it is? It's not facing the history squarely. Because the moment you do it, then you are led to the dark period of the history. And the dark moments in all our histories. You and I, you see me here as a scholar, I have moments that I don't want to remember at all. I want to forget them. They are part of my history. I should never forget them. Allah bi dhikrillah tatma'innul qulub means that, by the way. To remember the ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the way we rejected those ni'mah and misbehaved. That's what it means. Allah bi dhikrillah. It's not, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Subhanallah. That's not the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to remember His blessings. Ya Allah, at this age I can move, at this age I can walk, at this age I can do these things. It would have been impossible had it not been for your mercy. This is zikrullah. History is also zikrullah. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Dhakkirhum bi ayyamillah. Ayyamillah is history. I want to emphasize this. The Nabi Musa, all the Anbiya are being told that remind your community about the history. Because Yawm is when the haqq and batil are at odds with one another. That's Yawm. We have Ayyam al-Arab. In the pre-Islamic days, in Arabia, when the Arabs used to fight one another, tribes used to fight, these were known as Ayyam al-Arab, the days of darkness. They killed meaninglessly. Ayyam al-Allah are those days during which the truthful people are fighting the evil. Good people are fighting the evil. Evil and good are at odds. What we call in Christian terminology, Armageddon, which will come when Imam Mahdi will come. Nabi Isa will come. And there will be uproar, there will be, that history will unfold itself. I want to recapitulate what I've conveyed to you today. That writing of the history began much earlier. Information about historical events were recorded much earlier. But what you and I are left with cannot be taken without a grain of salt. We need to learn to read between the lines. Otherwise, we'll do injustice to the people who are mentioned in the history. This is true all the time. Whenever I go, anywhere, especially the young people, you find our young people are divided. Those who are extremists on the one side, or on the other side, there's no middle path. There's a lot of discussion about how much history should we remember, how much history should be retrieved. But if history is retrieved just for the sake of history and not for learning the truth, then it will damage our personality. I assure you, idealization of history is not going to help anyone. The truth about the history is going to stick with us. It's going to tell us what do we need to do next in our struggle. And this is what we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that may He give us the ability in this small community of ours to start classes in history where we can study the biography of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam properly, from beginning to the end. We don't have to agree with any historian. I will tell you honestly that I don't think I've come across any categorical biography of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Unfortunately, Quran doesn't have the history of the Prophet. It's speculative. The only one surah that speaks about his the state of his orphanage, and the guardianship that he received from Abu Talib, that's the only thing we have. Historically, we don't hear anything else. How he got married, what happened to him, we have no idea. In the history, we read it. And we read it posthumously. The first history that was written, Ibn Hisham was the editor of Ibn Ishaq. And that history was written in the year 90 of Hijrah. Year 90 of Hijrah. Almost 60, 70 years after the Hijrah took place. You and I are at the mercy of the information that is being preserved for us. Should we not read it? No, we should read it. We should inform ourselves and understand the intricacies of history and historical writing. I'll tell you, honestly, there's not a single jurist today, Sunni or Shia, who has attempted to write history. Sheikh Mufid is unusual. Tabarsi A'lam al-Wara is unusual. By the way, Tabarsi's A'lam al-Wara is one of the very authentic histories. Short, one volume, but worth reading. Also, Al-Irshad of Sheikh Mufid also is very interesting. Again, you might question the information and the sources. I'm still adamantly refusing to say everything they say is authentic because they happen to be Shia or they happen to be Sunni. I don't think that's the criterion we can use. But we need to read, and that I think can come through a team effort. And inshallah, we hope to do that in this center perhaps. And I'm sorry to tell you that I will not be here again on 3rd of May. Yes, is it Saturday? 2nd of May?
Yes, sorry.
I'm abroad again, you know. I'm sorry. All my conferences are taking place, you know. So we'll have to either, and I won't be back until 20th of May. So from 3rd to 20th, I will disappear again, you know. But I want, during the summertime, if you are willing, we can do it every fortnight. If not, so that we can make, otherwise we will not be able to reach anywhere. Because now we want to read history, we want to see what exactly happened, you know, so that we can critically evaluate where do we stand as readers. How do we understand? How should we understand? And I want to start off with the Seerah and the Quran together. So we read the Seerah and the Quran together. That's the best way to understand the Quran. Because we want to understand the creation and the revelation. Keep that in mind. And the only way we can do it is that bring the Quran together with the study of the biography of the Prophet ﷺ. Once we do it, it might take us 5 to 6 months. But once we do it, we'll be on the much firm grounds. And those of you who are coming, I would request you to be regular, and I will be regular also. In other words, I want a number of committed students who read with me, who discuss with me, so that we can have a regular class. Not a class that, you know, disappears, appears, disappears, appears, you know. I'm sorry, I have been that way myself. So I'm to be blamed, you know, if I don't get to see the same people that I saw in the last lecture, because it's my problem. So I will try to be, you know, after this 20th of May, I'll try to be more, you know, because I'll be here throughout the summer. Let us pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahumma adkhalna fi kulli khairin.
Amin ya Rabbi.
Adkhalna fi Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Wa akhrijna min kulli su'in akhrajta min Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Salawatuka alayhi wa alayhim ajma'in. Allahumma ighfir lana warhamna wa tub alayna innaka antat tawwabur rahim.
Amin ya Rabbi. Salawatu Muhammad wa ala.
Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam.